75, which is unaccounted for right now, from out of Boston.
I don't have any, can't confirm or anything or deny anything on that. That's
Joe,
the flight.
Got a number?
No, they have not.
Joe, did Flight 11 leave on time? Were there any delays? And was there any conversation between the pilot and the tower that seemed unusual?
Flight number 11 left at 7:59. I believe it was on time. And everything went as scheduled when it left Logan Airport.
Do you know how many people were on board?
I don't have a passenger count right now.
Are you aware of any communications from the pilot?
No, I'm not.
Would its flight path into L.A. normally have taken it south or towards New York, south to the west?
I can't answer that. I don't have any information on that flight path.
When did the tower hear the fact that there was something wrong?
Again, I don't have that specific information.
You know what time?
I don't know.
You know what time this United flight left?
I have no information on the United flight right now.
How unusual would it be for New York that we're heading to?
Again, I'm not familiar with the particular flight patterns they may have filed.
Was it a non-stop flight to Los Angeles?
I believe it was.
At what time, sir, were the flights stopped in Logan? What time?
What time was the airport shut down?
I believe we shut the airport down to arriving flights somewhere around 9:15, and departing flights shortly after that.
What happened to the flights that were in the air? Where are they?
They were diverted to other airports.
How long will the airport be down? How long?
Again, we're going to assess all the measures that we've taken. We want to, obviously, the safety and security of anyone who works here at the airport, any of our passengers, is a top priority.
Do you have a lot of baggage that
That's Joe Lawless, part of the security effort at Boston's Logan Airport. A number of the planes that have been involved in this extraordinarily horrendous event today began their day in Boston. The Boston airport, like airports now across the entire country, is closed. Every airport in the country closed. International flights, as you heard Mr. Lawless say, being sent to Canada as they approach the United States. These are scenes. This is tape from the ground, and obviously this is unedited tape, so kind of bear with us. It's a little raw at this point, but this was on the ground at around the Trade Center here in New York as the events began unfolding. And as you can see there, you can see that huge hole in the building of the Trade Center, both buildings standing at the time. You can see that where the plane, it almost looks like it came through the entire building.
And Aaron, we should remember what Wesley Clark told Judy Woodruff a couple of minutes ago about how much U.S. authorities have been worried about such an attack, how hard they've worked to try to fight it, how something may have gone wrong. And I believe we have on the phone right now someone who, both in fact and fiction, has dealt with justice, and that's author Tom Clancy.
Mr. Clancy, this is, I guess, a terrible case of life imitating art.
I suppose you could say that. It's a noteworthy incident. I mean, it's not the sort of thing it's the sort of thing that's best left in a novel rather than in real life. Unfortunately, one of the problems with being an author is keeping up with reality.
But, Mr. Clancy, you also are very well plugged into this world. From your own knowledge, how concerned have the authorities been that something of this scale could possibly hit on American soil?
It's Jeff Greenfield, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, Jeff, you've been here to the house. I mean, it's. I had a conversation some years ago with an Air Force general about the possibility rather like this, and I ended up putting in one of my books where you go where a bad guy takes an aircraft into the Capitol building during a joint session of Congress, which could effectively decapitate the whole government. And at the time it seemed rather humorous. I said, surely you've thought about things like this. And he said, well, to the best of my knowledge, nobody in my office has looked at this, but I promise you Monday morning they will be. Presumably they've been, they've considered this possibility for some time. The big problem is a person who is willing to lose his own life in voluntarily in a terrorist incident. The people like that are fairly rare, because self-preservation is indeed the first law of nature, and not too many people are willing to throw their lives away, and those who do it generally do it for religious reasons because they think there's something good waiting for them on the other side of death. in a case like this, that's going to lean people towards talking about, Islamic fanatics. But we need to remember that, Islam is a religion, and it's a religion with beliefs not terribly different from Judaism or Christianity. Or they believe in a God of love and justice the same as we do, and they're not all maniacs. And religious tolerance is one of the principles of our country. We need to hold on to that principle very tightly right now, because it's the principles you hold on to when things are tough that really count.
Fair point.
This was an act by a small number of madmen, and madmen don't characterize any part of humanity.
Tom, it's Aaron Brown. When you would talk to these officials in doing the research, did they see an attack of this enormity, or were they more concerned with these sort of devastating but smaller kind of hit and miss attacks that we've seen over the last 7-8 years?
Well, you don't ordinarily expect terrorists to display this degree of expertise. Flying an airplane is not all that easy. Kidnapping or hijacking an airplane, particularly with the safeguards we have at the airports right now, is not a trivial exercise. But unfortunately, the security you have at airports is not perfect, because nothing human beings do is perfect. Somebody thought very carefully and hard and long about this, and then they got some madmen to actually take control of the aircraft.
Tom, stay with me for a second. We a few moments ago told our viewers that United Airlines was concerned about another. United lost a flight near Pittsburgh earlier today, and officials said they were also concerned about United Flight 175, Boston to Los Angeles. And now we have reports that concern was justified. A second plane has gone down, United Flight 175. Again, that was from Boston to L.A. And as you look at the Pentagon, which was also hit by a plane earlier in the day. Jeff?
Yes, Tom, you were mentioning that this is such a rare act, and yet we now know of at least 4 commercial airliners that apparently were hijacked and either crashed or crashed into buildings, causing death and havoc of an unimaginable scale. So whoever is behind this is of a dimension that literally dwarfs even fantasy.
Pretty much. I dreamed pretty big when I dreamed, and fortunately or unfortunately, it didn't get quite this large. It's not, generally speaking, it's not credible to think that you're going to find more than one person who's willing to do something like this, because people who are willing to throw their lives away are fairly rare. In this case, they got somebody who was well organized and produced a well planned and reasonably well executed operation.
Well,
now we need to find out who it was, and then to go after him. But that's going to take time. But we do have the people to do that if they have the proper support from the executive branch of the government and from the general population of our country, to identify, locate, and deal with the people who performed this act.
The president said earlier today, shortly after the Trade Center attacks, the president characterizing these as terrorist attacks, and said that the United States government will do whatever it is necessary to hunt down those people responsible. I think it is fair to say, Tom, Jeff, all of you on the line here, it is fair to say that what we know is that this is an extraordinarily large operation, and what we don't know, in a way, is just how big it is. It seems that in each passing moment or so, we get another report of another incident, and our instinct tells us that they are all connected. We have a number of planes down, 2 American airline jets, 2 United jets down. We have a plane that hit the Pentagon. We had 2 that hit the Trade Center. You're talking about something that is, I think it's fair to say, Jeff, it is beyond anything any of us could possibly have imagined. I think that those of us who dealt with Oklahoma City, those of us who dealt with the Trade Center here in '93, as we both did, you say, that is awful what happened. And you look at what appears to be playing out today, and we have no idea yet what the loss of life will be. certainly in the hundreds. We know that hospitals here in New York are overwhelmed with people being brought there all over the city of New York and beyond.
The only piece of news that is the least bit, I guess, reassuring is that there is no report of any kind of chemical result. That is, the folks on the ground around the World Trade Center, the rescue crews, the survivors, there is absolutely no indication at this moment that there was any kind of bioterrorism involved. Not that what happened here isn't horrific enough.
Absolutely. And let me just add on again, small, medium-sized pieces of information as we go. All airlines in the country are closed down. All airports in the country are closed down. We now are being told that the U.S.-Mexican border has been sealed. We don't know if that is just simply part of a plan that the government puts into effect under a worst-case circumstance. This is certainly that. Or if there is some specific reason why a decision was made to shut down that border. Our senior White House correspondent, John King, on the phone. John? John? John King, can you hear me? It's Aaron.
I hear you, Aaron.
What have you got to report for us?
Aaron, I'm standing across from the White House. I'm told by Secret Service and administration sources that all of the principals, all of the protectees, meaning the President, the Vice President, the First Lady, and Mrs. Cheney, are safe. They do not want us disclosing their locations, but I am told by a senior administration official that the plan and the priority is to get President Bush back to the White House as soon as they believe it is safe. Now, there are both operational and political reasons for wanting to do that. The White House Situation Room, in the view of White House officials, is the best place from which to monitor events and direct any operations. That is a fortified structure within the White House compound where we know the Vice President was when everyone else was evacuated from the premises earlier. Again, the Secret Service does not want to confirm for us for security reasons, or administration officials the same, tell us where those people are now, although I was told a short time ago the Vice President is still in a position to be monitoring and directing the response to these developments, and that the President, who is en route back to Washington, we're told Andrews Air Force Base is on full alert. I was also told that there are extra precautions that were taken to ensure the President's flight back to Washington was a safe one. Now, you can read into that additional fighter jet escorts, Air Force One always has some escorts with it, that additional fighter jet escorts were put up for that. Now, the political reason they want to get the President back to the White House is rather obvious. The White House believes this has been a tragic terrorist attack, and they want to send the signal that the President is back on the job at the White House. Priority one, though, officials say, is to guarantee that he can be safely brought back to the White House. And in the past half hour or so, we have seen security precautions on the street, checks being taken out on the street, on the grounds around the White House. There are snipers up on the roofs of the White House itself, including buildings around it. And a military helicopter gunship flew over the premises not that long ago, about 15 minutes ago now, and then it circled back over toward the Pentagon, where from my location you can still see smoke coming into the sky from there. But we are told the Vice President is still in a position to monitor all this as the President makes his way back.
John, thank you. Our senior White House correspondent, John King. As John mentioned, the President was in Sarasota, Florida, making his way back to Washington. Whether he'll be taken directly to the White House or not is a little bit unclear. Secret Service wants to make sure the building is safe. It is, I would add, one other symbolic reason why you would want to get the President in the White House, and that's to send a message to who's ever responsible for this, that yes, you've caused extraordinary damage and a great deal of tragedy here, but what you haven't done is shut down the American government. The President will want to get home. Governor George Pataki of New York joins us on the telephone. Governor, are you there? Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here.
What are you hearing from the Trade Center area itself?
Well, we're still hearing that it's a horrific situation. We're in desperate need of people to help out with emergency services. The city team is there, but we've activated our National Guard and our statewide fire and emergency services, and we're going to be bringing those in to relieve the city forces as the afternoon goes on. I've been in touch with the mayor, I've been in touch with the White House, and everything that we can do and everything that can be done is being done at this point.
Has anyone given you any idea of how many injured we are dealing with down at
Not
the
at this point. At this point, the sole goal is to try to help as many people as possible, to get them to the emergency services, to get them the care they need, to help people who want to leave the area to leave in an orderly way, and to make sure we do everything we can to provide security throughout the city and throughout the state.
And Governor Pataki, can you tell me the degree to which the state's planning for these sorts of tragedies, and there's obviously a plan in place, and New York is, because of its place in the world, is obviously a place you have to consider a target, whether that plan envisions something of the magnitude of what has taken place this morning?
Well, you plan for any eventuality, but you never actually expect to see something of this magnitude. But we have coordinated well with the city. We're going to continue to make sure we provide all the support we can. We do have emergency services and emergency transportation running. I know the reports have been inaccurate. We do have limited rail service out of Grand Central to the northern suburbs, limited rail service out of Brooklyn and Queens to Long Island. We're working to make sure that bus service, to the extent possible, continues, and we're trying to get subway service back on track. It's not there yet, but the coordination has been excellent. It's just an attack of this magnitude. We just have to focus on responding and helping people at this point.
And do you have any idea how many people have been hospitalized, or how many hospitals are involved, whether they extend beyond the city?
Not at this point, but every emergency service, every hospital that can provide assistance is providing assistance. The people have been just terrific in their response, and we're going to continue to make sure that response is as strong as it can be.
Governor, take a moment and tell me, not as the governor necessarily, but as a resident of this state, an important player in the affairs of
in 2 weeks on NBC.
Almost there.
Final portage.
Let's do it. John and Paula are late.
Hey, it's tough portage.
Timber Lodge Steakhouse.
Oh, they're here.
Escape the ordinary and get away to savings during the Labor Day sale at Home Furniture. You'll find beautiful selections to match your personal style and create your own daily escape. Plus, relax with no payments for 1 year. Escape from the ordinary. The Labor Day sale ends Wednesday at Home Furniture.
Zach, the lip ring is caught on my braces.
Don't move.
Call someone?
I'm not using my minutes.
Just use them.
I'll call after 8 when my rates go down.
That's 4 hours away.
3.5. Don't be so dramatic.
Hey, she's young. Maybe her next boyfriend will have Voice Stream's Whenever Minutes.
The most whenever minutes, only from VoiceStream. For whenever you feel like calling.
The U of M cracks down on underage drinking at 10.
Fiesta, fiesta, fiesta.
Carla and Lando, in first place, thought they had negotiated a ride to the Mongolian capital. They are really only headed to the next town.
Country, they say they are underutilized right now, while the hospitals downtown closer to the Trade Center are absolutely overwhelmed. So they have put out a call to EMS saying, bring people in here. It is an emergency call. What I have seen at this point are some patients staggering and being helped in, nobody in apparently critical condition. The hospital tells us that they've had 65 minor injuries. Those are broken bones, internal injuries, smoke inhalation cases. There have been 10 major
injuries. Hillary, I need to interrupt you.
One person brought in.
Hillary, I need to interrupt you. This is a Taliban spokesman talking now in Kabul, I believe. This is coming to us by video phone from Afghanistan. And I am not hearing, and perhaps you guys are, but I am not hearing him.
We should remind our viewers that Afghanistan was one of the sites that was hit 3 years ago by the United States.
د افغانستان اسلامي امارت د تروریزم په رابطه باندې همیشه خپل موقف په ډاګه ښکاره کړی دی.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحیم. The Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan has already explicitly said its standpoint or its position about terrorism.
د تروریزم ټول انواع او ډولونه لکه څنګه چې په افغانستان کې هم ورانه پیش کړي دي او دلته موږ همیشه د تروریزم ښکار شوي یو دلته موږ غندلي دي او په نړیوال سطح باندې هم د دې غندنه کوو.
We have criticized all forms of criticism as Afghanistan has itself faced and has become the victim of terrorism, and you are now criticizing kind of acts.
تروریزم یو ویرونکې داراچونکې او نفرت پېښونکې لاره ده.
Terrorism is a terrifying and hateful hatred or hateful method.
او دغه پېښه چې سوی د بشري پلوه خورا پراخه او لوی ناورین دی.
And this incident is, from the humanitarian point of view, surely a very vast and very terrifying incident.
Any questions?
Any questions?
Question, please. Have you received any kind of information, any kind of communication from the United States or any other organization?
The American متحدة ایالات یا د بل قانون کوم رابطه درسره شوې ده؟
نه تر اوسه پورې چا کومه رابطه نه ده کړې او اوس تر ټولو مهمه خبره ده چې هغوی په ژغورنه باندې اخته دي. کېدای شي چې یوازې هغوی ته د تسلیت پیغامونه تللي وي او دا چې اسلامي امارت سره چا تماس نیولی دا خبره تر اوسه پورې نه ده.
No contact up to now. They might be busy or surely they are busy in the rescue operation. So they need condolence, but up to now, no communication from them.
Does the Taliban categorically condemn these attacks on the United States?
Taliban په مرحله واره توګه په امریکا باندې دغه حملې وړاندې
موږ د توریزم ټول انواع همیشه غندلي د پخوا څخه په دې باره کې پالیسي ښکاره وه.
Our policy was very clear from the very beginning, and we have criticized, and even now we criticize terrorism in all its forms.
Can you rule out any involvement by Osama bin Laden?
Osama bin Laden لاس هیڅ قسم ته یا هر یو قسم ته لاس درلودنه په سکرین کې راپردوي.
تر اوسه پورې چا په هغه باندې رسمي تور هم نه دی لګولی.
No.
To Sudan were taken in 1998 after attacks which were believed to have been the work of Osama bin Laden and perhaps some state-sponsored terrorism groups connected with him. President Bush says we have taken all appropriate security precautions to protect the American people. The president in this new statement says, make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts. The President of the United States says the U.S. military has been put on what he calls high alert status. He says he has taken security precautions to ensure the functioning of the U.S. government. The President cut short a trip to Florida following the attacks this morning in New York and Washington. But where the President is going to wind up, we do not know at this time. Instead of going to Washington, he apparently went to Barksdale Air Force Base outside Shreveport, Louisiana. At least that is what we were told, and the videotape that we're expecting any moment from the President will originate there. New York City Mayor Rudolph Giuliani reports rescue workers are finding survivors. Here's a ray, just a glimmer of New York. The mayor says Lower Manhattan looks like it was bombed in World War II. Well, it has been bombed in the World Terrorism War of 2001. Bombed in the sense that American Airlines says 2 of its planes were hijacked, and then they were we know not how, the details of them, but they were crashed into the World Trade Center itself. These scenes are where the debris is thick and the smoke goes like clouds and will for a long while in Lower Manhattan, on the edge of Greenwich Village, right at the tip of Manhattan, with the Statue of Liberty in the background. These attacks have occurred one day before the sentencing of an associate of Osama bin Laden in connection with the embassy bombings in Tanzania in 1998. The sentencing of this associate of bin Laden, and forgive my pronunciation, Mohammed al-Okali, the accused in that were convicted in a court here in Manhattan. They face the death penalty. They're charged with directly assisting the American embassy bombing in Kenya and in Saudi Arabia. In the background, of course, there was another terrorist attack in the Cobalt Towers in Saudi Arabia in the 1990s, still unsolved, although there were many in the U.S. government convinced that bombing of the U.S. Air Force Towers, apartment building really in Saudi Arabia, was connected to the government of Iran. That was a belief, but there was never solid evidence put out to that. These are scenes from earlier in the day, but now we're going to take you to Belleville Hospital as soon as we can put up the pictures. New York hospitals are overwhelmed with the casualties. In Bellevue Hospital, every available doctor, nurse, orderly, working on cases of the injured. If you're saying to yourself, what can I do? One thing you can do is stay off the telephone. That would be helpful, particularly cell phones. The other thing you can do is think about, not at this moment, but think about contributing blood, because blood plasma supplies are going to be very short, to say the least, as New York City deals with an unprecedented situation in which the mayor has said and the police have also said there are bound to be tremendous numbers of dead. The leader of the Hamas organization has denied any responsibility in the attacks. Well, there'll be a long line of people denying responsibility for these attacks. Leaders of the Taliban, the radical fundamentalist Islamic group ruling Afghanistan, which have been in the process of protecting Osama bin Laden, we were told have been quickly gotten out what can only be described as a public relations operation, denying that they have anything to do with this. But all of that will be dealt with as time goes along. Scott Pelley, 60 Minutes 2 correspondent and another veteran CBS News correspondent who work here and abroad, is in downtown New York. Scott?
Dan, the last 3 hours or so, I've been down here a couple of blocks from the World Trade Center. We're just now getting the first wave of firemen and paramedics who have been working the scene around the rubble of the World Trade Center buildings. They're starting to walk out now as their ships are replaced, and we've had an opportunity to talk to some of them. One gentleman, actually an elderly man, who told me he was a retired New York City fireman who ran to the scene when he heard what had happened to help out, described for us a scene in terms of bodies and body parts strewn all about the area around the two World Trade Center towers. In the streets, he described them, on the sidewalks. He said there didn't seem to be many walking wounded in the area. What he saw primarily was bodies and parts of bodies. He didn't care to estimate how many there were. I asked him if he could give me some idea, and he looked at me and said it's countless. We also spoke with Lieutenant Rene Diavola of Battalion 4 here in the New York City Fire Department. He's an EMT. He was the first EMT supervisor at the scene after the first airplane hit the first tower. He told us that he was working triage when the second airplane hit the second World Trade Center tower. He saw the airplane come in and saw it cut the building, as you have already seen on videotape. It seems almost in half when it hit. He described the debris raining down on the firefighters, the paramedics, the police officers who were responding to the very first of the two plane impacts. He said, I saw the building collapse. There was debris falling all around me. And at the point that the first building came down, he said that the firefighters were trapped in a swirling mass of debris and smoke, and he described how he and other firefighters literally held hands and walked up the street to try to get to safety. As soon as he found a telephone, he told me that he called his wife to tell her that he loved her. We have spoken to a number of firemen who have come out of there. You have to understand, Dan, the difficulty down there is it's impossible to see. I'm standing just a couple of blocks away. As you see on your live cameras, there's a huge towering cloud still above lower Manhattan. And down here on the ground, people are telling us that only a couple of blocks closer in, you can't even see your hand in front of your face. It's very, very difficult to work, to see, to breathe. One fireman stepped out of there and told us, the world is an evil place. I know that now. Dan?
Scott Pelley in lower Manhattan. We've just passed the 1 o'clock hour in the east. A little more than 4 hours ago is when all of this started. 3 hijacked planes crashed into major U.S. landmarks this morning. They destroyed both of New York's 110-story tall towers, and they plunged into the Pentagon. This is the timeline. The South Tower of the World Trade Center was hit around 9 o'clock. Then the North Tower was hit. Air traffic in the U.S. was closed about 9:30. President Bush spoke from Florida. At that time, he's spoken since via videotape from Louisiana. Around 10 o'clock, a plane crashed at the helicopter pad at the Pentagon, did damage, set fire to portions of the Pentagon. There have been some casualties. Any dead, we don't know. There were some injured because we saw them at the Pentagon. Then the South Tower incredibly collapsed. Then the North Tower, the Twin Towers, the World Trade Center collapsed. And one pauses after you say that because, it's almost unbelievable. And then there was a plane crash in Somerset County, Pennsylvania. That's in the Pittsburgh area. Now, Pentagon spokesman Glenn Flood is just now quoted as saying, and I quote him directly, that there have been extensive casualties and an unknown number of fatalities at the Defense Department. That's the first time they've confirmed that there have been casualties. We go to CBS News Pentagon correspondent David Martin, our national security correspondent. David?
Dan, over my shoulder, you can see the fire engine still trying to put out the fire that began when the plane hit the building. If you were at a different location, you would be able to see that plane cut into that building just like an axe into a birthday cake. This is the west side of the building. People who were working on the east side of the building say they had their windows blown out and they saw a fireball. This for the largest office building in the world. So this plane caused extensive damage. Now, eyewitnesses have described a plane which the FBI decided was a description of a commercial 767 airliner or a 757, which would be consistent with the report of the airliner being hijacked, the American Airlines airliner being hijacked as it was taking off from Dulles bound for the West Coast. No confirmation that is what happened. As to extensive casualties, certainly anybody that was on board that plane could not have survived that crash, and anybody who was in the direct path of that plane when it hit the building could not have survived. From a different perspective, you can see that floors 2, 3, 4, and 5 have all collapsed in on each other. It is a sight which I'm sure nobody in their wildest imagination thought they would ever see.
David Martin at the Pentagon, our national security correspondent. Jim Stewart, one of the best reporters in America when it comes to this kind of situation, has been working this story from the very beginning in Washington, and has new information about the early reports of a plane crashing at or near Camp David, the presidential retreat outside of Maryland. Jim?
Dan, the FBI now is trying to sort together what has actually happened here and what they still don't understand. And what they do know has happened is, of course, 3 separate terrorist attacks in the United States, the World Trade Center, at the Pentagon, and some event that has occurred in Pennsylvania, including that affected a commercial airliner. Because of the proximity of that crash of the commercial airline in Pennsylvania to Camp David, there is a presumption by some in law enforcement that Camp David may have been the target of that attack. That, of course, was a hijacked commercial aircraft that we are told did not respond to repeated attempts to communicate with it either by the military or the FAA. Now, other things that the government is confirming at this hour. Number one, they received no warnings. They had no hint of any attack against domestic targets in the United States. Number two, they have not received any claim for any of these attacks from anyone. And number three, although they have no evidence that this is the case, they are assuming and presuming that there could be additional attacks within the United States and are reacting appropriately. To do so, they have set up command posts, we are told, in Washington, in Phoenix, and in Los Angeles. Moments ago, the Attorney General of the United States returned from out of town. He was taken by an armored car convoy to the FBI headquarters. Would you ask him, please? Excuse me, Dan, we have a little bit of confusion here in our newsroom at the moment. I can also say that the intelligence community is now saying officially that they do believe that these attacks have the signature, as one official put it, of the Al-Qaeda organization. That, of course, is the terrorist organization that is under the control of Osama bin Laden. They said that is, quote, our lead theory. Dan?
Jim Stewart in Washington now. At Barksdale Air Force Base in Shreveport, Louisiana, President Bush is about to come out. We believe this is live, although we've been told earlier that it'd be played on videotape. Here is the president. Well, folks, it's live television in a situation like this. I know you understand that mistakes happen to err is to human, but to really foul up requires a computer, and we've had some computer difficulty. We're going to once again try to bring you, and we now believe, I know this is confusing, but let's face it, it's a confusing situation, that the president flew from Florida, apparently to Barksdale Air Force Base outside Shreveport, Louisiana. We were told that he would appear, make a statement on videotape. Then we thought it's live. Now we're going to the videotape. We're having some difficulty, but here is the president, we hope, speaking on videotape from Barksdale Air Force Base in Shreveport. We're going to try again to show you the videotape of the president speaking here.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward, and freedom will be defended. I want to reassure the American people that the full resources of the federal government are working to assist local authorities to save lives and to help the victims of these attacks. Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts. I've been in regular contact with the Vice President, Secretary of Defense, the National Security Team, and my cabinet. We have taken all appropriate security precautions to protect the American people. Our military at home and around the world is on high alert status, and we have taken the necessary security precautions to continue the functions of your government. We have been in touch with the leaders of Congress and with world leaders to assure them that we will do whatever is necessary to protect America and Americans. I ask the American people to join me in saying a thanks for all the folks who have been fighting hard to rescue our fellow citizens and to join me in saying a prayer for the victims and their families. The resolve of our great nation is being tested. But make no mistake, we will show the world that we will pass this test. God bless.
That is the President of the United States, George W. Bush, who is in Shreveport, Louisiana at Barksdale Air Force Base. He was in Florida, where he was speaking on the subject of education with the Secretary of Education at an elementary school when he received word today of the bombing. I call it a bombing, the terrorist attack on 3 locations in the United States, including the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, on the Pentagon, and some sort of a crash that's taken place in Pennsylvania that may have been aimed at and perhaps even did, in fact, hit Camp David in northern Maryland. That he is at Shreveport, Louisiana, suggests that Washington, D.C. Is still considered by the national security folks an unsafe place to be. We've been following this story all day. You know that there has been an attack on the Pentagon, and President Bush has just now promised the country that we will find and punish the people responsible for these cowardly acts. Here in Minnesota, security is tightened, but the primary elections are still going on. Tony Berlin is here with me now. He has more on what can only be called madness.
It is, Don. Chaos really across the country as 4 terrorist attacks, now we're saying 3, hit different locations, the 2 World Trade Center towers, the Pentagon, and now they're investigating a plane crash like you talked about in Pennsylvania. The mayor of New York says there's been a horrendous number of deaths in his city. Here's a timeline of what's happened so far.
Smoke now billowing from the
It all started just before 8 o'clock Central Time. A plane crashes into a tower of the World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan. The second plane crash, caught on tape live, hits the second tower of the World Trade Center shortly after 8 o'clock. President Bush in Florida spoke minutes later.
Today we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
Then about an hour later, an aircraft crashes near the Pentagon, just outside Washington, D.C. From the ground, you can see injuries. Government buildings in Washington, including the Capitol and the White House, are evacuated because officials are concerned about more threats of a terrorist attack. Minutes later, a car bomb explodes outside the State Department, and there was a report of a loud explosion in the vicinity of the Capitol. Just after 9 a.m. Central Time, 1 World Trade Center tower in New York collapses about an hour after being hit by a plane. Now, as many as 50,000 people work in those Trade Center towers. The death and injury count is still unknown at this hour. Across the country, Don, flights have been canceled nationwide for the first time ever at their departure airports. Almost every government building and agency on alert in reaction to this attack.
One of the problems that the FAA is currently facing, there are about 50 domestic aircraft still in the air that were literally caught in the sky when this rule was passed down. According to the most recent reports, those planes will be allowed to land. They still don't know exactly what to do with the international flights.
A lot of those flights, I'm told, have been diverted to Canada.
Some have been diverted to
Canada.
Exactly. As Tony has reported, all of the airports are closed, ours included, and all flights grounded until further notice. Dave Huddleston is at our airport with more. Dave?
Don, that is the very latest from Tim McAllister, the airport director here. He says that all flights coming in and out of Minneapolis-St. Paul International are delayed until further notice. He is recommending 2 things. 1, people who have flights to call the airline before they come here. You can see the backup of people who have arrived thinking that things were going to start once again at 1 o'clock when Operation Ground Stop was scheduled to restart. But again, the very latest, that has been delayed until further notice. So these passengers that you are looking at are trying to find accommodations. The director here, McAllister, tells us that there are 1,200 international passengers alone. 4 Korean Airlines planes have been forced to land here because of Operation Ground Stop. Numerous scheduled Northwest flights, scheduled and unscheduled flights, have been brought here to the airport. Again, he is recommending that you call ahead, and the people that are here to call their loved ones to let them know that you are okay. The other thing, security here at the airport. He says officers here moved to a 12-hour shift, and there is clearly, Don, a presence of police officers here outside the airport as well as inside the airport. K-9 officers are here as well as bomb-sniffing dogs. We will have the very latest. We'll stay here on bring you the very latest as it becomes available, Don.
All right, Dave, thank you. Here's a piece of information that the people in law enforcement would like us to pass along to you. If at all possible, stay off 911 unless you have an actual emergency, or, they say, if you spot something that you believe is suspicious, you wish to report a crime. But for further information, all you have to do is go to WCCO.com. We have a full page built of all of the information numbers you would need if you're interested in trying to track down further information in New York, if you have relatives there, if you have people that you believe are on any of those flights. Here in downtown Minneapolis, the IDS Center is closed. The Mall of America is also closed in Bloomington. Noelle Walker is live at the mall. She has more. Noelle.
Don, I was just thinking what a stark contrast it is between Dave Huddleston there at the airport with wall-to-wall people, and here I am in a virtually empty parking lot at the Mall of America. How often did that happen? The Mall of America is closed for the day, and they've just officially made that decision a few minutes ago, within the last 20 minutes or so, I would say. They say they're closing for the day out of respect for the country, and so their tenants can organize their employees rather than having employees wondering if they're going to have to come in later on today. They say this was not a business decision. Obviously, they're going to lose quite a bit of money today. They say this is one of safety. On average, about 100,000 people a day come here, and they have 12,000 employees at the Mall of America, so a lot of people here. They say there are no threats and no reason to think that the mall is a target, but still they have tightened security here. The mall is not allowing any deliveries here today. At 9:30, they evacuated the employees that were here and some of the early shoppers. We spoke to a couple from the Chicago area who flew up here for the day specifically to go to the mall.
It's very unnerving, I think, to realize that our country is, in this situation. It's very vulnerable. Yeah, very vulnerable. And what can we do? It's very sad, to hear about all this happening to those people.
To reiterate, Mall of America is closed today, and tomorrow they are planning to open as far as they know right now. Live at the Mall of America, I'm Noelle Walker.
All right, Noelle, thank you. The attacks are obviously shaking people everywhere here. Dennis Dota joins us with more. What is happening now at Minneapolis City Hall? Dennis.
Well, Don, let me show you some videotape from Minneapolis City Hall, shot just a short time ago this morning. And you see clearly the security officers from City Hall and also Minneapolis police officers locking down all of the doors, keeping in contact with one another on the radios, working to make sure that they've done everything possible to secure the area there and make safety there prime precaution this morning. It was just a short time ago that Minneapolis Mayor Sharon Sells Belton talked about the city and the status of our city, and she says we're not shut down, that we could not let terrorism interrupt the city primary elections or the business of the people of Minnesota.
No, we are not calling for a shutdown in the city. There's no reason for us to do that. There is no direct threat to the city of Minneapolis. As we get information